Oh, yeah. Oh, my. Oh, my. I bet you want to try that now, don't you? Let's get it. All right, we got a quick build for you today. And since it's me, I noticed that my neighbors were going to chuck their old snowplow. And I figured, you know what? I could use the handle for my obnoxiously large mallet, which I'll leave a link in the description below. But I was like, this is some pretty cool metal, and I have an idea just based on the shape of it. I don't know what sparked the idea, but I just knew that I wanted to make a trident out of it. Because what former sailor doesn't want a trident? You know what I'm saying? So, like, let's get into it. So the first thing I did was that I needed to make a template for the actual, like, part that goes onto the handle. And so I'm just tracing one half of it just to make sure that it's symmetrical. So then I have a rough outline just based on interweb pictures of how the trident is going to look. And I'll use my little tiny knife that I made in order to get a nice sharp line. So I just folded this piece of paper in half, and I just, like I said, I'm just going to draw like a really crude template for myself to cut the metal into trident shape. And so I'm only going to use half of this so that A, it's going to be symmetrical, but also like I don't want it to wander too much whenever I'm using the angle grinder. And that way I can just make sure that everything just looks appropriate, even though this is going to be just, you know, like a prop. And there we go. It looks very Trident-like, right? Something that like Poseidon would be proud of. You know, as like an amateur for myself, you know, maybe not like for the court or whatever. Anyway, so like, yeah, so you saw earlier that I had that little piece where like the handle is going to fix to. Right now it's riveted in place. I wanted to make sure that it was going to sit appropriately on the actual meat of the trident blade itself, or whatever you call the trident, pitchfork, trident, on the actual meat of the trident, the metal. So as we go along, right, the paper is quite thin, and it, like I was mentioning earlier, it tends to wander, so I want to make sure that I get a good outline traced on the piece of metal itself here so that I can take it to the angle grinder appropriately. And whenever I did that, like before, I had to drill out the rivets on the handle piece itself so that it didn't get in the way of the angle grinder whenever it came time. So here I'm just taking my time here just to kind of get a rough shape, and eventually it starts to give. Getting around the inside parts did pose some problems, but as long as you take your time and just do so safely and methodically, and you chuck your metal across, it'll eventually give way. So there we go. And then at this point, what I wanted to do is just, you know, it kind of bent into position. I'm trying to get those corner pieces. I have to use a pair of pliers in order to get those out because it takes a little bit of just scoring the metal and just like a coat tab. You just bend it back and forth until it comes off. And it doesn't really look like much now, but we're going to go ahead and shape it with the angle grinder with just a different attachment so that we can get rid of those rough, sharp edges, the burrs, and all this kind of stuff. And then it starts to look a little bit more better. So here's the piece, right? I said that I drilled out the rivets. And so now I'm just going to go back and just use that in order to drill out the actual holes so that I can re-rivet it back on the trident piece itself. So I take it to the belt sander right here just to smooth out any of those rough edges from the filing and the angle grinder from earlier. And then we're going to punch out to start getting the, not like Mike Tyson's punch out, but, you know, the punch for the drill so that we can get the handle back on. And just take your time with this. Make sure that you have something in order to catch the blade. I don't want it to spin. That's why it's clamped. And I'm using that piece of scrap wood just so it doesn't spin and, you know, trident me in the chest because that's the last thing that we want. Yeah. And so with Disco Skull over there in the corner, right, you can check out that short, monitoring my progress. I'm just going to, again, just make sure everything is nice and smooth. I don't want any kind of nicks, burrs, or anything that I can catch myself on with this prop. And we're also just going to kind of clean up shop, literally, getting all those metal shavings, which, like, I kind of think it looks cool. It looks like a mushroom or something. I don't know. Or just, like, you know, magnet shavings. All right. So I'll take my big bar of steel and start just pounding makeshift rivets back into position so that I can have this stay secured onto the handle so that we can take it back to the, the metal handle piece so that we can get the wooden handle back on itself. And so it's going to be a little bit smaller because I did knob off the end of it to fix onto this big old mallet, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know, serendipitous, I guess. I'm using my big old mallet in order to get the handle pounded back into position. And there we go. So now it's riveted. We got the trident piece. We've got the handle back on the wood. Now all we need to do is just drill some screw holes so that it'll be properly secured for the long run here. And I'm just going to use a hand drill to do this part because why not? It felt like the hand drill was the more appropriate route. More skulls in the corner. This one's made of cement though. Link in the description. So if you want to check that out, that'd be great. I really appreciate it. It'll help out my channel to go check out my other content. And I'll poke the skull in the eye because why not? Oh wait, it's in the nose. Yeah, get your booger. That was kind of scary. But this is pretty, like, for being just like a Halloween prop or whatever, this is pretty dope. But if you think this is cool, you haven't seen nothing yet. You know they always have that weird music during knife making videos. Totally jack that up. I don't know what people have against fruit, so I just use like cold water. All right, that was amazing. I hope I didn't get any of the red dye on me, but I think I'm all right. I'll catch you on the next one. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.